In my book, My Road to Damascus, a journey through spirituality and mental health that leads to liberation and personal development, I put a piece in the book where I was describing the fight between Julio Cesar Chavez and Mildred Taylor. The fight was March 17, 1990 in Las Vegas, Nevada. They were the two best junior welterweights in the world, fighting for, I think at that point it was 2/3, because now in boxing, they probably got 7 or 8, 10 world championship belts in every division. But back then, it was mainly the WBC, WBA, and IBF championships. They were fighting for two of those belts, the WBC and IBF. And as I looked at the tape once again, I realized that they had been plotting this fight for a long time. This was not like we've seen in recent memory, where you would have two great, highly skilled fighters in the same division who figure out ways politically, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally to not fight. Back then, it was a little bit different. The promoters understood that the best way to make the best amount of money in boxing is to put the best fighters in the ring with each other. You know, I speak a lot about mental health. I speak a lot about learning yourself, learning who you are, not forgetting who you are. I speak about being positive. I speak about perseverance and understanding that just because something does not seem like it's going in the right direction, that in a fair fight, anything can happen. In a fair fight, an individual can be winning every round, and at the end of the fight, end up losing, because it's not what happens. It's not about the distance of 12 rounds or 15 rounds if you're talking about stuff that was going on before the 90s, because when they used to fight 15 rounds was the perfect way to make sure the cream always rose to the top. Boxing is a metaphor of life, and if you have a gift, and if you have something that you do, if you do it on a regular basis, and you become good at it, and you believe in yourself, and you believe that what you're doing is righteous for yourself and for your family, it's no shame in not getting a goal that you give 100% to try to attain. Just ask Mildred Taylor that. He fought probably the most perfect fight you could possibly fight. But Julio Cesar Chavez figured out a way, after all the hell that he had been through, for 10 and a half rounds, to persevere, to continue to believe in himself, and ultimately, with 2 seconds left in the fight, scored a knockout. why is this fight important to me tonight? Why am I sharing this with you guys tonight? Because I had a hell of a day. The day that I had wasn't physically challenging. It was a mentally challenging day. I started out waking up, being thankful, drank a cup of coffee. I started to run, but before I ran, just the little gnawing thoughts of negativity had began to seep into, my spirit. So I was able to do pretty well, but I felt like I guess today's going to be the day that I'm going to have to deal with a mental war, a mind war, as I described in my book. And I'm just going to do a plug right now once again. If there's anybody out there who's in whatever struggle that you're in, please go out there and pick my book up. My book is designed to let people understand that they're not alone in whatever challenges that they have in their life that they've been so consumed by that they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. My book helped me deal with my pain. And as an artist, as a living being on this planet we call Earth, it is our job when we go through hellacious situations that we share those experiences with people and that we are able to give, I'm trying to think of a word, commentary to what we went through so that other people behind us can get the same information and possibly change the trajectory of their lives based on learning from someone else's experiences, mistakes, and just life in general. So, a couple of incidents happened today that got me really thinking a lot of really horrible, bad thoughts. And begin to uncover some old wounds that are in the process of healing. I'm a practical guy. I'm a simple guy. I don't like shit complicated. So if I come to you with a clear issue that's A, B, and C, and there's no other way to deal with it other than just head on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of energy has to be put in dealing with the issue. It just means that I'm taking the time to alert you of something that could be a horrible problem. And when the person receives what I give them, instead of taking basic adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, they try to create algebra out of it. Instead of being simple, they want to be complex, which is frustrating to a guy like me. Because all I want is for an individual to understand me, for it to register in their mind what my needs and wants are. And if you have a question about it, I don't have any problem whatsoever explaining the question, explaining what I need to you. And then if you still are not thinking on my frequency, and you can find something to complicate what I've simplified, then you're just an asshole. So that's what I had to deal with today. And there was a series of things that happened, and my mind and my energy was so out of whack. And the first thing that happened in a positive direction for me today was Tori, put on some hip hop, man. Get your mind off of this shit. Just put some hip hop on. Even if you can't really listen to the lyrics like you usually do when you're listening to music, just the sound of hip hop calms me down. I am this thing called hip hop. I'm just living and breathing in physical form, but I am that. But the bad thoughts were still coming in, and I was still frustrated and angry. And at this point, I was even to the point where, I don't know, I thought about doing some real reckless shit. So I finished my work, got home, and originally, I thought about doing something that Abraham Hicks would advise individuals to do if they're having a challenging day and there's too many negative thoughts seeping in. Abraham Hicks teaches that the best way to break an avalanche of negative energy is to simply take a nap, to stifle the momentum of the bad energy, and then you can start off fresh again. I was going to do that, but then something said, put on Julio Cesar Chavez versus Mildred Taylor. And I made a salad. I turned it on YouTube, and I started watching it. And from the first round on, what I noticed the most about the fight was the fact that Julio Chavez was not playing for the decision. He wasn't fighting to win a decision. If you know anything about Mildred Taylor and the way that he fights, the guy can throw 100 punches around. Not only can he throw 100 punches around, he has exceptional footwork. Not only does he have exceptional footwork and throws 100 damn punches around, he doesn't have like knock you dead punching power, but it's just enough to keep you from coming so he can continue to carry out his plan, which is to impose his will to take yours by sheer activity, and you'll either wear down and get knocked out late, or you'll lose a lopsided decision. This was the perfect plan, if you will, to fight a guy like Julio Cesar Chavez, who doesn't throw a lot of punches, but throws accurate, pinpoint, destructive punches. He's not trying to out-jab you. He's not trying to be pretty, do the Ali shuffle, throw a bunch of pretty combinations. He's throwing the left hook to the body, and the overhand right, and the straight right, and he's mixing it up. Sometimes he goes to the head first with the hook, goes back down to the body with the right. Sometimes he starts with the right to the head and then ends with the left hook to the body. Julio Chavez had to be in some of the most spectacular condition that a human being can possibly be in, knowing that his style is tailor-made for a guy like Meldrick Taylor. But this is the part in what I'm saying that I want people to get. For at least 8 straight rounds, Taylor fought a perfect fight. Around 9, you can tell how tired he was, but even before the 8th and 9th rounds, you can see the physical destruction that was going through, or that was going on with Meldrick Taylor. Every punch that Chavez landed had the intent to stopping the fight then. Taylor just had a lot of heart. He had a great chin. He threw hell at Julio Cesar Chavez for 10.5 rounds. At the 11th round, you can see that the only thing that can stop Julio Chavez from winning was just time running out. But like I said, I don't think Julio Chavez even considered going 12 rounds because he knew that he'd never win that type of fight, because he knew that he would lose too many rounds because a guy's throwing 100 punches around. So he had to make sure that his plan was pinpoint. He had to make sure that the punches were accurate. He had to make sure that everything he did led to something else that can get to his end result. You can almost see in his mind how he's saying to himself, sooner or later, I'm going to drop him. I don't know when, I don't know how. I just know that the punches that I'm delivering and the punches that he's taking, there's no humanly way that he could last a whole 12 rounds. Chavez had to go through the pits of hell to have heaven on earth. He never stopped coming. And you can tell around the 8th or 9th round that it was going to take a miracle for Taylor to get to 12. Not just to get out of the 12th, but just to get to 12. Because he took so much of a brutal beating that you didn't really understand what was taking place until you look up at the 10th round, the 11th round, and Taylor's sitting in his corner, and it seemed like he had been fighting 15 men. Chavez never gave up on himself. The corner was paranoid. I mean, we're talking about a guy who won his first 66 fights before this fight with Meldrick Taylor. He was 66-0 by the time he fought Meldrick Taylor. And the corner was trying to implore this guy, dude, we're losing every round. You need to do something. They just wasn't in there with that motherfucker. They didn't have to deal with Meldrick Taylor and all the angles and all the punches and the 8, 10, 15 punch combinations that he would throw. They didn't understand that Julio Chavez was in a situation that it would take something outside of himself just to get past the beating that he was taking to landing one of the most beautiful right hands that finally, after the load of punches and punishment that Meldrick Taylor took in just a round and a half. I mean, in a round and a half, Chavez completely turned the fight around. And it was only a question of, can he do it before the 12th round bell ended the fight? This is what we need to be studying when we come up against the challenges in life that we have to endure on a daily basis. An individual can have so much anger and animosity and bitterness over what he got through, not understanding the blessing that he endured to get through it and still keep going. But instead of thinking about the blessing that he endured getting through it, he succumbs to his negative energy. Julio Chavez could have said, you know what, there's just nothing that I can do with this guy tonight. I mean, the guy is just like, it's almost like fighting an octopus. Chavez, after the fight, in his interview, one of the first things he said is, Meldrick Taylor is a great fighter, and he definitely deserves a rematch. He was showing respect and love to someone he was competing with. But he knew, which years later they fought again. And at this point when they fought again, Meldrick Taylor was nothing like he was when they fought the first time. He had been knocked out a couple of times, and he began to look pretty good enough to where people saw a little bit of slowing down in Chavez at this point and said, well, maybe even if Chavez is going to probably win, it's still going to be a good fight. And it was. The second fight was a decent fight. But because of all the wars and the punishment that Meldrick Taylor went through for the years before that rematch, including that night that he fought Chavez that first time, it was just too much, man. Chavez acted the way a human being is supposed to act when your back is up against the wall and you don't have no other way but to deal with the problem in front of you and act like a straight up G and deal with that problem. I'm just so inspired tonight by watching that. And you know, the thing is, I watch that fight at least 2 times a year because I'm always fascinated with watching Julio. The commentary on that night was decent. It had Sugar Ray Leonard, Jim Lampley, and Larry Merchant. And for most of the fight, they were heavily speaking of Meldrick Taylor. But for whatever reason, they weren't looking at the accumulation of punishment that Julio was putting on Taylor round after round after round. Let's translate that to us. Day after day after day, there's this one thing that we can do, and we know that that thing that we can do can bring us the life that we want. And sometimes life has a way of throwing you in the mix of a situation where you can't see a way out, where you don't know where your next meal might be coming from, where you don't know where the next roof over your head will be able to protect you from the elements of outside. You don't know if you're gonna have enough money to pay your rent, but you just know that if you keep doing what you've been doing, if you keep exercising the gift that God gave you, sooner or later, something is going to happen good for you to turn the whole trajectory of your life around. Julio's life was forever changed after that fight. Unfortunately for the bad, the same happened for Meldrick Taylor. But this fight, March 17th, 1990, on St. Patrick's Day, where a black man was fighting a Mexican man for the biggest belts in the 140-pound weight class. That fight was a classic. But that fight was a metaphor for life. Everyone needs to be a bit Julio Cesar Chavez. Everyone who's gone through hell needs to understand that even if you don't know how the result's going to come out, you still have to keep doing that thing that you do. Especially if your spirit has always told you this was what you were supposed to be doing in the first place. Sometimes it takes us a long time to understand that. And the longer it takes for us to understand that, the more challenges can arise, because your spirit is what's controlling everything, and your spirit is what's letting you know that this is the best way for you that I've already mapped out. And you have to simply stay the course. When you stop using your gift, bad shit happens. If you don't know what your purpose is in life, bad shit happens. If you don't know what you're doing here, bad shit happens. If you don't know who the fuck you are, bad shit happens. Julio knew who he was. Julio exercised his gift. Julio persevered. And at the end, he had one of the most dramatic wins that anybody in the history of sport, of boxing, could ever have. He beat a great fighter that night. And he had to be greater than that great fighter on that night, where he surely was going to lose. But I just wanted to let people know, once again, my road to Damascus, a journey through spirituality and mental health that leads to liberation and personal development. That book is for you. I went through the hell so I can give you a map to walk around it. I'm still going through things. I'm not perfect. I'm still healing, ing. But that fight tonight showed me that you just got to keep putting on your big boy pants every day until you get the goal that you want.